Aging in America. Aging in America. Aging in America podcast hosted by the award-winning Quintia journalist Tam Lawrence. It's informative, that's caption and alarming. Listen to true aging stories. Be aware with Age Guard, sounding the alarm to protect the aging in America. It's Aging in America now, streaming.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining in. This is episode 4 in the series of Aging in America, sponsored and presented by the BetterAgingBureau.org. Also supported and sponsored by Exposure Magazine. You can find Exposure Magazine at iloveexposure.com. You can also find this on ExposurePlusTV.tv, which is an app syndicating over the top of television networks today on every smartphone and smart device. You can find us on Amazon Fire Stick, Apple TV, Android, television, as well as Amazon Fire Stick. And this particular episode is Bridges Cross That Cost. We all have crossed some bridges in communication that we may have been at the liberty of others and it cost us. And I always say that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, but never let your character take you somewhere your calling can't keep you. Needless to say, this subject or this particular true story is real, and it's a real life story. So for the sake of protecting the individuals who were involved, I will not be disclosing their actual names, but I want to tell you this so that you are well informed that these institutions that care for our aging are set up systematically to do about Miss Connie. She was my elementary teacher that I recently just helped over the past 2 years with a situation that was a bridge in which she crossed that cost her. And so let's just dive right on in if you guys don't mind today. Thank you so much for waiting. I just recently had surgery, so I was off for a couple of weeks. But I'm actually so excited to be back here on Aging in America. This is my vocational calling, and I'm following that vocation because I believe in protecting the interests of the vulnerable, and most importantly, protecting those who are aging in America. I was a caregiver for my mom for over 13 years, and 6 years personally cared for her before she passed on in April. So let's go and dive right into the story. So Miss Connie had 30-something years as an educator, and her husband was an entrepreneur who owned a construction company. Had reached her senior years, let's say that. She had reached her senior years and retired from the education institution in the MPS school system. Her husband had 30-something years in owning his own construction business. They were excited about the opportunity to spend time with their grandchildren and their children. So this was a really glorious time for them, the golden ages, the time that they could just spend to love on their families. However, Miss Connie one evening had made this really incredible, delicious dinner for her husband as they sat down at the table, talking about things that they were going to do and how they were going to journey out. They were kind of going over their bucket list this evening, just going through it and laughing and having a great time. Miss Connie's husband had his grin on his face as she was speaking and talking about times that they had done things together, whether it was climbing mountains or traveling to Canada. And they once even went to Ghana to see their homeland and how things were so beautiful there. They had a future ahead of them that they were so excited about doing together as they both reached the retirement stages. But Miss Connie's husband felt it was best for him to continue to keep working even though she had retired. So she had taken off for a couple of weeks and went out to see her grandchildren right before they had this particular dinner. When she returned, he was very interesting in terms of how he was moving, a little bit slower than usual, and sometimes he felt disorientated. So they went to the doctor, and the doctor prescribed him with some medications that would help him. So this evening at dinner, as they were laughing about the past and reminiscing, Miss Connie's husband froze. But when he froze, he was sweating and he looked at like there was something really wrong. And so she rushed over to him across the table and she said, "Honey, what's going on?" He didn't say anything back. So she rushed to the telephone to call the ambulance. He was having a stroke. They had to start to look at things differently. What would they do and how could he retire from work? However, Miss Connie encouraged her husband to keep going. Don't move, honey. You got to keep moving. Don't move past your dream. This has always been your dream. So he began to position his business to bring on apprentices so that people would be able to study under him and keep the company going if he should decide to retire. So Miss Connie's husband continued to keep working because she always encouraged him to keep working, honey. You got to keep working. You got to keep moving. Unbeknownst to Miss Connie, on a Saturday afternoon, instead of letting his apprentice go and some of the other guys go do the work, he decided to go and climb a ladder and fix some light switch fixtures at a local grocery store. He had fallen from the ladder and broke his hip. He ended up in a hospital that evening. Unbeknownst to Miss Connie, he was in the hospital and she didn't even know it. She was searching for her husband all day. And then she got a phone call because she was the emergency contact from the hospital that her husband had been admitted. Miss Connie rushed over to the hospital as quickly as she can. And in the room, she found a doctor who told her that this would be a major surgery that he would have to go through to repair his hip. And then he would have to go through rehabilitation. The next day, room, talking with him and going through paperwork in regards to their assets and cares at home. But during this conversation, Miss Connie's husband disclosed that his wife had encouraged him to continue to keep working, and he didn't mind that, but he just felt like it was, his place to be the man, the breadwinner, to keep the family going. While this conversation went on for about an hour of him sharing information with these caseworkers just the day before, Miss Connie sat down in a chair as she was greeted by these caseworkers, and she held her husband's hand and talked with him. You can hear the caseworkers in the back as they exit the room chattering about what they should do next in order to protect the interests of the parties involved. They then went about their business and called the caregiver system case management team together. During the case management meeting, they disclosed some information that Miss Connie's husband had told them. Thereafter, they started to approach the guardian that was on call with the hospital to allow them to deal with the stages that protect the interests of the elderly from abuse. Now, you're probably saying, now, what abuse happened, Tam? I didn't catch the abuse yet. Well, listen closely because you're about to find out what could happen. So, day 3, Miss Connie arrives at the hospital just as normal to see her husband. This time she appeared with his favorite food and some balloons that the children had sent and said, "Get well soon, Dad." She sat in a chair and she rubbed his hand and gently kissed him on his forehead and said, "Honey, that everything will be okay." Miss Connie was asked to come to the case manager's office to speak with him in detail about the living arrangements and if they had any support outside of herself at home if he was to return home after rehabilitation. She gently told them that I would never leave my husband's side. I will always be with him. We are fine. Day 4, when she arrived at the hospital, Miss Connie's husband wasn't there. She was shocked. She was all but livid and was, "Where's my husband?" She ran to the nurse's station and asked the nurse, "Where's my husband?" And she said, "I can't tell you at this time. They did move him. He may be in rehabilitation, but I'm sure you'll hear from the caseworkers." These caseworkers had contacted a guardian who moved to do an emergency removal to put him in a safe place, based on the fact that he said that his wife had encouraged him to go back to work and was really adamant about it because she wanted to see him continue on and get the confidence that he had not lost his manhood. He was still the man that he was. That was the interest that Miss Connie had in him. Not only did she love him for over 30 something years, she didn't want to see her husband sit down. She wanted her husband to continue to keep moving so that he would never feel like he was absent or that he was not worth it or that he had lost his way. Now, these caseworkers had come up with their own analogy, their own narrative of how this situation resulted in him falling off of this ladder because after the stroke, he should have taken some time off. He should have been able to do that without being forced back into going to work. This is how they saw it. The guardian then went for an emergency replacement in the courts without anyone being there. Now, this is important. You don't have to attend court for them to do an emergency award to the state. He was awarded to the state and removed to a rehabilitation center to where Miss Connie could not see her husband because they felt that she was a threat to him. Forcing him to go back to work is what they put down. This was a really dark moment for her because she had done all that she could do she thought that she was doing the right thing by encouraging her husband to do what it is that he loved to do so that he would not lose a sense of life. But now she was faced with court cases and the removal and award to the state of her husband, and she would have to find a way to get to him. They would not tell her exactly where he was located at, so days went by. She was calling caseworkers over and over again. "Can you please just tell me where my husband is so that I can see him?" They indicated that until the judge made a ruling, there was nothing that they could do. Immediately, we spoke right after. So I began to start calling around and writing letters and seeking out support from the Butts Osmond and elder abuse state ran organizations to see if they would help. No one was helping. People were quiet. Everyone was silent like this was going on. But what they had collected in those conversations was the fact that Miss Connie and her husband owned assets. They owned several properties, and he was a business owner, and pretty well to do business owner, I must say. So this changed everything because these hospitals were looking at his assets and seeing that even if they put him in rehabilitation or nursing home, they had enough to cover based on the fact that they owned their home free and clear with no mortgage. The case goes to probate and she appears in court, and the judge tells her that she may see her husband, but it must be on. So the case goes to acknowledge and disclose that Miss Connie can only see her husband, but there must be a supervised visitation in place. She was shocked, totally just thrown, didn't really know exactly what this all meant, but she just needed to see her husband. So accepting the supervision visitations was something that she just did immediately so that she would be able to talk with him in person. Now, where is the coercion or the abuse that we find in this situation based on what these caseworkers just did? Well, elder abuse is where someone knows that this person has medical conditions that may result in them having to retire or not go to work or what have you. And the fact that he was an entrepreneur, this was just something that was ritual for him to get up in the morning and go to work. And that wasn't something that he wanted to quit as well. But the fact of the matter that he said his wife encouraged him to return back to work even after the stroke, they took it upon that he was being forced into a situation without any consideration for his health or concern for his health. Therefore, the medical institution had to take it upon themselves to see what was in the best interest of the patient and how this was considered elder abuse unknowingly. So, if you all are watching right now the case with the former president Biden and Jill Biden, First Lady, former First Lady, they're looking at her and saying she knew about his medical conditions. She knew that he had some issues and she did not disclose that information in regards to President Biden. So, right now, Jill Biden is looking at being charged with elder abuse because she collaborated or hid information concerning his health that should have retired him. This is real, people. And if you look into this case deeply, you'll find the information was not just based on what Miss Connie said, but the findings of the medical staff, the caseworker, and the guardian getting involved. Can somebody be removed from someone's care, even if it's not physical abuse or verbal abuse or a road that you crossed that you did not even see, but it was in the communication and the disclosure of information? Now, would they do this if Miss Connie or if Joe Biden or Jill Biden did not have assets? In most cases, they probably wouldn't even look into the situation and allow that person to go home. But because there was assets, these institutions look at it and say, basically, they have enough to cover the cost of what they're going to do, whether that be nursing home placement, hospice placement, rehabilitation, respite care, whatever the case may be. There is enough assets here to cover all concerns, financial concerns, as they would say. We were able to get Miss Connie's husband home and to correct the situation. However, many don't see this. Over 60, based on the financial boards and consideration that is given from elder abuse organizations and government statistics, we found that only 63% of seniors who are placed in ward cares mistakenly or based on the fact that it's in their best interest ever return to their families. 63% are placed into ward care, never really truly return. No matter how many court cases and dates you go through, no how many attorneys you pay, as long as those assets are available, the courts will continue to run the bill. They'll continue to run that bill until there is nothing left. They will liquidate the assets to pay whatever court costs, whatever guardianship, court appointed attorneys, things of that nature will run its course, leaving the family and destitute. After this is all over, there is no inheritance. There is no such thing as a family leaving a legacy to their children. Are you aware? Are you awake? Are you with me on understanding why it's so important for you and I both to have this conversation and for this information to reach the hands of every family? I hope that you will share it. After I finish up right here, I'm going to bring my investigative team in to really help elaborate on this particular issue. Don't go anywhere.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're doing what we always do, digging into some source material on a really critical topic.
Yeah, this one's called The Bridge Cross That Cost. We're looking at excerpts particularly from elder abuse, forced labor, and medical neglect.
And it touches on work related to Tam Lawrence, the founder of Aging in America.
Our goal today is to unpack something pretty specific and honestly quite harrowing that comes up in these sources.
Which is?
It's this immense pressure sometimes put on an older loved one to keep working, even when they're sick, even when doctors say stop.
Denying them rest or retirement or just the care they need when their health is clearly failing.
Exactly.
And the sources flag this as, well, surprisingly common, but often hidden, something that could really impact any family, right?
Absolutely. And understanding it is key. The sources, they characterize this specific pressure-forcing work, despite health issues, as both emotional and financial exploitation.
Okay, emotional because you're kind of overriding their wishes, their autonomy, maybe making them feel guilty if they can't work.
Precisely. It could strip away their dignity,
Yeah.
forcing them into something their body, maybe their mind, just isn't up for anymore, especially if a doctor has explicitly advised against it.
And the financial exploitation part.
Well, the sources explain that the person doing the pressuring often benefits directly from the elder's continued income or their labor. It's basically using their resources at the expense of their actual health.
Disturbing. And the perpetrators aren't usually strangers, are they? That's what the material suggests.
No, and that's, I think, part of why it stays hidden. The sources identify perpetrators as potentially a spouse, an adult child, maybe another close relative, someone trusted.
Wow, and the results, the consequences, the sources seem pretty clear they can be, well, devastating.
They really can. It can speed up physical decline, cognitive decline too.
Yeah.
And tragically, it can even be fatal sometimes by preventing needed rest or medical care.
So this brings us to the legal aspect. The sources mention state and federal laws.
Yes, and according to those laws referenced, this behavior fits squarely into legal definitions of elder abuse.
How so?
It can be seen as financial exploitation, obviously, but also emotional abuse and, importantly, neglect, especially when medical needs are ignored.
So it's not just morally wrong, it's potentially criminal. The sources say many states specifically classify coercing an elder into work that harms their health as abuse.
That's right, especially when it goes against a doctor's direct orders. That seems to be a really clear legal line according to the material. Ignoring medical advice to force labor, that's abuse.
Okay, let's talk scale, because the stats mentioned are, frankly, shocking.
They are. The National Council on Aging stats cited suggests 1 in 10 Americans aged 60 plus have experienced some form of elder abuse.
1 in 10, that's a lot of people.
It really is.
And the financial cost.
Globally, the World Health Organization figure mentioned puts the cost of all financial exploitation of elders at over $36 billion annually.
36 billion.
Yeah. And while that's not all this specific type of forced work, the sources imply this kind contributes significantly. Exploiting income, assets gained through that forced labor. It's a huge hidden drain.
Given how serious this is legally and personally, what happens if this kind of abuse is proven? What can the courts do?
Well, if it's substantiated, the courts have options. The sources mention things like protective orders, keeping the abuser away, potentially changing guardianship to someone safe. There could be criminal penalties for the person responsible.
Right.
And in really severe cases, a judge might actually order the abusive person removed from the elder's home.
Okay, so let's bring this back to you, the listener. Why should you be aware of this specific, maybe seemingly niche form of abuse?
Because the sources suggest it's actually not that niche. It's a risk in any family dynamic where there's vulnerability, an older person, health issues, financial dependency maybe. Recognizing the signs of this dynamic, the pressure to work, despite health warnings, despite doctor's advice that's crucial. It's a specific way exploitation can hide, maybe even disguised as helping out or keeping them active.
Okay, let's just quickly recap the key takeaways then. This specific type of elder abuse involves forcing work against health needs, often ignoring doctors.
It's defined legally and ethically as emotional and financial exploitation, often by family members.
With really severe health consequences and clear legal definitions, especially about violating medical orders, leading to serious court interventions potentially.
Exactly, and it contributes to that massive overall cost of elder exploitation.
So thinking about that scale, the 1 in 10 number, the tens of billions in cost, here's a final thought for you to consider based on what we've discussed.
What does that sheer scale, the huge cost, suggest about how often this specific bridge forcing work against health might be crossed, maybe even right under our noses? And what are those really subtle signs, the easily missed pressures or disregard for health that maybe we should be looking for in our own lives, our own communities.
Before we go, we want to thank you for spending this time with us on Aging in America. Stories like the one you heard today aren't just shared to inform. They're a call to action. If this episode moved you, here's how you can help. Subscribe by visiting thebetteragingbureau.org. Use the Better Aging Bureau's trusted directory, a carefully vetted resource for professionals, services, and products to guide you or your loved ones through aging with dignity. No one should have to navigate this journey alone. Share this episode with friends, family, or colleagues who might need it. Awareness saves lives. We see this as more than a podcast. It's a mission. Every subscription, every share, every voice added to this cause helps us fight for those who've been silenced. From all of us at Aging in America, thank you for standing with us. Until next time, be safe, stay faithful, and keep praying for strength and justice. We'll see you soon.